The process of ovulation is controlled by a delicate balance of hormones, glands, and signals between the brain and the ovaries. When this balance is disrupted, ovulation may not occur regularly, making conception more difficult. One medication commonly used to help stimulate ovulation is letrozole, also known by the brand name Femara. To understand how this medication works, we first need to look at how the normal reproductive cycle functions. Inside the ovaries are thousands of tiny sacs called follicles. Each follicle contains an immature egg. At the beginning of each menstrual cycle, several follicles start to grow. However, in most cycles, only one follicle becomes dominant and continues developing. This process is controlled by the brain. The hypothalamus and the pituitary gland release hormones that regulate the ovaries. One of the most important hormones is follicle-stimulating hormone, often called FSH. FSH travels through the bloodstream to the ovaries and stimulates follicles to grow. As the follicles develop, they begin producing estrogen. Estrogen plays a key role in regulating the cycle. When estrogen levels rise, the brain senses this increase and gradually reduces the release of FSH. This feedback system helps ensure that usually only one follicle becomes dominant. However, in some women, the hormonal signals are not strong enough to stimulate proper follicle development. Ovulation may become irregular or may not occur at all. This is where medications such as letrozole can help. Letrozole works by blocking an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase is responsible for converting certain hormones into estrogen within the body. When this enzyme is blocked, estrogen levels temporarily decrease. The brain interprets this lower estrogen level as a signal that the ovaries are not producing enough hormones. In response, the pituitary gland releases more follicle-stimulating hormone. With higher levels of FSH circulating in the bloodstream, the ovaries receive a stronger signal to stimulate follicle growth. As a result, follicles begin to enlarge and mature. Inside the growing follicle, the egg develops and prepares for ovulation. Over several days, one follicle usually becomes larger than the others. This is called the dominant follicle. As the dominant follicle continues to grow, estrogen production gradually rises again. Once estrogen levels reach a certain threshold, the brain triggers another important hormone surge. This surge involves luteinizing hormone, or LH. The LH surge signals the mature follicle to release the egg from the ovary. This process is known as ovulation. After ovulation occurs, the egg enters the nearby fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is where fertilization can take place. If sperm are present within the reproductive tract, one sperm may meet the egg in the fallopian tube. When a sperm successfully penetrates the egg, fertilization occurs. The fertilized egg, now called a zygote, begins dividing into multiple cells. As these early cell divisions continue, the developing embryo travels toward the uterus. Meanwhile, hormonal changes prepare the lining of the uterus to receive the embryo. If implantation occurs successfully, pregnancy begins. Medications like letrozole do not directly mature the egg themselves. Instead, they influence the body's hormonal feedback system. By lowering estrogen temporarily, the medication encourages the brain to release more follicle-stimulating hormone. This stronger hormonal signal helps the ovaries stimulate follicle growth and egg maturation. Because of this mechanism, letrozole has become widely used in fertility treatment, particularly in women who experience irregular ovulation. It is often prescribed for conditions such as ovulatory dysfunction and polycystic ovary syndrome. However, treatment is typically guided by healthcare professionals who monitor follicle growth through ultrasound and hormone testing. Understanding how medications interact with the body's natural hormonal system helps explain why treatments like letrozole can assist the ovaries in producing mature eggs. The reproductive system is highly coordinated. Hormones, glands, and organs communicate continuously to regulate the cycle. When this communication is supported in the right way, the chances of ovulation and fertilization can improve. And through advances in reproductive medicine, many individuals now have additional tools that help support this complex biological process. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more health explained in 3D.